Welcome back to part 2 of our silicon rubber mold demonstration. Part 1 had the mold prepared and we had the rubber mixed. Now we're going to be pouring it. It's very important to pour at one side of the mold and slowly let the mold rubber creep over the base by its own accord, rather than trying to spread it or by moving the rubber back and forth. Allow it to creep until it covers the entire base, gently adding more rubber as you do. This reduces air capture and gives a cleaner mold. When the entire base is covered, you can then add the rest of the rubber however you like. If you find you need more rubber, you can add more within about an hour. This is also a reason why we added a little bit more rubber than the initial calculation, because we can never get all of it out of the tub. So we have to allow at least 10 to 20% more just in case. As you've got all the rubber removed as much as you can, just let it settle, as there will be some air bubbles from the pouring that need to rise and disappear. While we wait for it to set, you can clean your knives and then just stick them in the dishwasher. The silicone is food grade, so it's not poisonous or toxic, so the knives can be used normally for eating afterwards. It's important to cure this in room temperature, roughly 20 centigrade plus, overnight, and then we can remove it. Take your knife and slit the plasticine down one side. We have put it in the fridge to harden the plasticine prior to cutting it to make it easier to remove the clay. Pry it all off without dislodging the mold from the base. It can be a bit messy because plasticine is quite sticky even after being hardened. Take the base off the underlay board and carefully separate the base from the blue mold. After that, the next step is to transfer the master from the base to the new mold so we can make the second half. After you've cleaned all the plasticine you possibly can from the original blue mold, begin to remove the ingate from the base and attach it to the new blue mold. Push it down to make it as neat as possible. Remember, you want to make sure that you keep that parting line as clean as you can. Take the master part from the plasticine base and now push that back into the blue mold. After that, we can start creating the second half. Put it back onto your underlay board and begin the process of putting a plasticine wall all around the mold. But first we need to trim the edges of the blue mold in order to get a tight seal for the second half. This is loose sections that had bled into the corners of the wall originally, and they need to be cut away. Just take a sharp scalpel or sharp blade and remove them at a slight angle all the way around. There shouldn't be any lip on the mold at all. Take your time. More preparation now saves less waste later. Don't forget to rebuild the little bridge between the master and your ingate, otherwise your entire project will fail. It's a small task, easily overlooked in the excitement, but fill it all in, blend it in as close as you can to avoid any indentations, to make it a nice smooth transition so that when you're eventually casting, the metal will flow straight down into the master gap. The tools are very handy for creating a nice even blend. And that's it. Make the plasticine walls exactly the same as we did in part 1 with the roller and some plasticine. Then take strips and apply it carefully around all the sides of the new blue mold. Cut additional strips if you need and blend them together. You want a complete seal, 360 degrees all the way around, that will attach and have no leaks or gaps. This is very important, otherwise you will end up with a flawed mould. Brush on the Vaseline that we had in the tub, just the same as we did with part 1, all over the mould, covering the entire base, as well as the master and the ingate. Make sure that it is thick enough so that it will be easy to remove, but not lumpy. So avoid any chunks of Vaseline anywhere in the mould, as this will disrupt the flow of the rubber. Follow the same instructions as we laid out in part 1 for the second batch of silicone rubber. Now that your mould is ready, pour it gently at one end of the mould, just the same as we did with the first pour, so that it slowly creeps over the entire surface at its own pace. Let it do this until it fills the entire section of the rubber. The surface should be completely covered, and then you can fill up the rest of the mould as you please, up to the brim. Leave it overnight to settle, and then we also left it in the fridge for a few hours to let the plasticine harden. At this stage, then you can peel off the walls. The plasticine should be reasonably easier to remove once you have kept it cold, as it's lost some of its stickiness. Peel it off as carefully as you can all around the mould. Congratulations, it looks good so far. Now we have to check to make sure that there's no problem within the mould, so peel it apart carefully. And yes, that looks good. We removed the master and we removed the ingate now, as these are now redundant. However, the mould is not quite finished yet. It's still a bit untidy. Despite it looking very well, there's a lot of flashing and lip on the molds that will affect casting. So we need to clean all that up, again using a sharp blade. Just run the blade at an angle all the way around, not only the joining part of the mold and the ingate hole itself needs to be opened to make sure there's no flashing on that, because that would interfere with the metal flow. So clean that out nice and neatly. The bottom of the bases also need to be cleaned up as well. There are lumps and an edge on that need to be removed. This will allow better adhesion to when you're putting on support boards to prevent them from wobbling. So clean all that up all the way around, and any little lumps or blobs on the back of the mold can be carved off. And once you've completed that, then the mold is now ready for testing for casting. First, heat the metal and scoop away any residue or dross on the surface. Then once you've got your molds open, nice and clean, add your talcum powder or your release agent to both sides of the rubber mold using the cotton swab. Make sure that both sides are evenly talked. And then we can clap the two sides together to remove any excess dross from it. Now, fit the molds together carefully to make sure that they're a nice neat seal, and attach your support boards. The support boards insulate the mold and spread the pressure of the clamps. We're going to use 2 clamps to hold these molds together. If you feel you need more, then add more. What you want to do is try and avoid leaks if possible. If a leak does occur, you can move the clamp and see if that resolves it. Bring the metal over in the ladle and rest it near the mold, and then pour it straight into the hole all the way up to the top. You can give the mold a tap to help settle the metal. After about 5 minutes, the metal should have set, and you can peel it away to get an example of the casting inside. Looks very promising. Let's compare. Yes, they both seem very alike. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. More on princeaugust.ie.